Always a pleasure to have Rob Ellis join me on Good Morning NFC East. And either way, Rob, before I start, I do have to answer these questions for some of our, I should say our streamers or commenters. I would get killed in one-on-one because I'm not a one-on-one player. And Davey, I wouldn't say I'm John Stockton. I'm more of a 3-point specialist these days.
You're a combo guard, Jeff. You can do it all, man. There's no shortcoming in your game. You need some buckets. You got it. You need to distribute. You can do it as well.
I will say this: I am a pain in the ass on defense, though.
Yeah. All right. That's good.
Yeah, you gotta be right. You gotta get in someone's head somehow. I'm only 5'6".
Yeah, if you're not super skilled, you got to be a nudge. All right, you want to be a nudge on defense. Trust me on that. Yeah,
exactly. So, Rob, I know I was on WIP with you earlier this week. We were kind of talking about the whole Jalen Hurts, Micah Parsons thing. Did you like how Parsons kind of backtracked yesterday?
I mean, first of all, I heard you guys having the discussion last segment. You know who's a system individual? Mike Tyson, Tiger Woods. If you play a sport where you're by yourself, no, I'm kidding. You're the opposite of that. They're not system guys because they're not in a team setting. I think it's a joke, man. Micah Parsons, we know how talented the guy is. You followed him closely at Penn State. We know nobody's denying what kind of player he is, but he fits right in that cowboy mode as a guy who shoots his mouth off and doesn't know. In one vein, he's saying how much he knows the game. He understands the sport. And then he starts rattling off how Jalen Hurts has no numbers, paying no attention to the numbers that Jalen Hurts has, first of all. Look, it's exactly what I thought he was going to do yesterday. Look, I can't wait for this game, Jeff. I wish the team can't fast forward through the Bears. I wish we could. I can't wait for this game. I hope they run it down his throat and stick it right to him.
Yeah, I've told people this. Any Eagles fan should want for Christmas them to win, and this was a couple weeks ago, them to win the next 3 games because they would clinch everything.
Yeah.
And they get to do on Christmas. By the way, wouldn't it feel like 2006 where everybody thought Dallas was going to beat them and there was no way the Eagles were going to win 3 straight NFC East games on the road, and yet they did? To me, like growing up, that was one of the more satisfying wins I had, watching the Eagles and Cowboys.
That was a big one, man. And it's an underrated in Eagles lore kind of win. I think, because it was sort of a weird time. It was like a transitionary time, and some of the guys who came up big in that game, you kind of forget about. But yeah, I agree with you. It does sort of have that feel too.
Yeah, and this is way before you went for it on 4th down, especially at the goal line.
Yeah.
I remember thinking, like, what a jerk Bill Parcells is to think he can run Marion Barber or Julius Jones up the Eagles defensive line, and Broderick Bunkley and Mike Patterson got to him, and as a defensive player, that had to fire you up. And I honestly thought that carried the momentum for the Eagles the rest of the game that day.
I agree with you. I agree. Look, this is going to be there's a lot of superlatives you can use for this game, the Christmas Eve game. There's going to be a lot of hype around this, man. I mean, we've seen regular season games be big. I'll go back to 85. You had an undefeated Bears team against Miami Monday night in Miami, and Miami beat them. It's going to have that kind of feel. I'm telling you, man, especially if both teams win this week, it's going to set up that way because the hype machine's already been started.
I actually put on that game on YouTube like a couple months back, and just hearing Howard Cosell hype up that game, like at the beginning of the all Monday Night Football intros, I'm like, him and Frank Gifford, I'm like, oh my God, like how can you make a game even bigger than what it actually was? And then you put those two in it. Like it's no disrespect to Burkhardt and Greg Olsen, because I do like them, but man, that game would be perfect with Buck and Aikman.
It would. It's weird. Speaking of that, does it not feel just a little bit different with them on Monday night? What I mean by it just doesn't feel as big. Like they should still be doing the #1 Fox game every single week. And I know I'm just sort of like pining for the past now at this point, but it hasn't elevated Monday night for me. In fact, it's just kind of like it's sort of lessened the feel with Buck and Aikman. I don't know how to explain it, but it doesn't have the same vibe to me with them.
I feel like there's always 2 changes they needed to do in Monday Night Football since they moved it to ESPN. They got to bring it back on ABC.
Yeah.
And they got to give them better matchups. You like some of the matchups you're like, Colts Steelers, really? Like, that doesn't fire me up. But if they could find a way to get the big division games on there, and ESPN should really flex their muscle and say, you know what? We're paying a lot of money for big games.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, the whole Monday night flexing starts next year. That's when I think it's going to really help them.
No, I agree with you. And I think, both, although last night was a good matchup, no doubt, but the one who's really gotten the short end of the stick is Thursday night. I mean, the prime games with Michaels and Herbstreit have been, turds, for the most part. But and I'm sure Al Michaels isn't thrilled about it. But guess what? You took the money and ran, man. So this is what you got to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, he had a chance to go to ESPN from what I heard.
Yep. I think he could have done whatever he wanted. I know NBC wanted to move Tirico in there. I get it. But there's a lot of different directions he could have gone. I'm sure he enjoys the fact that he's got his weekends back and those kind of things for a guy who's, what is he, 77, I think, whatever.
Yeah.
But I think that, the games have been real. He's openly mocked the games for the most part.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And you're right, though. Like, Jim and Tony get the big games now.
They do.
Yeah. I think they got, who's Cincinnati got this week? Oh, Tampa Bay.
It's a good one. I mean, in theory, it's a good one of those. I think Tampa stinks, but yeah, it is it's still an important game for sure.
Yeah. It does feel like, though, like, the whole Buck Aikman thing. I'm glad you brought that up because now with the cross flexing, like, I know for a fact we're going to have more NFC games down the line because it's like we have the AFC package, but there's going to be more NFC games for us. Same with Fox. It's like they found a way for CBS and Fox to have their cake and eat it too on Sundays.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pleasantly surprised the way this year's played out from an Eagles standpoint because we've gotten a lot of 1 o'clocks. There's a lot of things that could have changed here towards the back end of this season, and it looks like it's going to stay kind of status quo. I think the one that's still up in the air, you could see the Eagles Saints maybe if there's still some meaning there because I don't think the Eagles Giants is going to mean anything. That one's still TBD. But I think for the most part, if you like 1 o'clocks and you're an Eagles fan, you kind of lucked out here.
Yeah, they got a lot of primetime games, but they got them early.
Yes.
It felt like I remember we were joking in the press box. Me and John Kincaid, like every single game I think we did was at 8 o'clock. And he's like, well, it's going to get better at some point. And we're like, yeah, unless they get flexed. And
yep.
We thought the Titans game was going to get flexed, never did.
I was surprised that one didn't, honestly. Like, I didn't see this one because the Bears are so bad, but I thought the Titans game was definitely going to get flexed. I thought maybe last week could have gotten flexed.
Yeah, that was the rumor. Like last week's game was going to get flexed. And I think they decided to flex Giants Washington because that was in contention for one of the Saturday games this weekend.
Right.
And I think NBC said, oh, hold on a second. We have a chance to do Giants Washington.
Look, and that makes perfect sense. You get two big markets. It's a game that both teams, are right there playoff wise. I think the Giants eventually are gonna dip out of this thing, but who knows? I mean, Seattle keeps losing. Giants could backdoor in.
I do want to ask you this: who does get that last spot? Because, like you said, Seattle's fading, Giants are fading.
Yeah, it's. I'll tell you. I mean, do we completely write off some of these Carolina type teams? I mean,
what about Detroit?
Yeah, and Detroit's probably playing better than anybody else, and they're getting better quarterback play. Certainly, like do I trust Sam Darnold in big spots? No, I don't. But Goff is quietly putting together a really nice year, and man, he's got some weapons, especially with Jameson Williams coming back. Add that to Amon, St. Brown. The weird thing is they trade away Hawkinson, which kind of you think now they could really use him, but. They're good. They're dangerous, man, and they've drafted well. Like Hutchinson has been a beast. I actually kind of like watching Detroit play, tell you the truth.
Yeah, I've interviewed Amon St. Brown a couple of times, and the first time I interviewed him, I got him to laugh his rookie year, and he don't laugh too much. I said, how did you get the nickname Sun God? Because that's one of the greatest nicknames I ever heard. He started laughing.
Yeah.
Like that was when he actually named the 16 receivers ever drafted before him, which is crazy how he remembers that.
Oh, he's that guy. Okay, I like that.
He did that during Hard Knocks too. Everybody's like, that's so cool. I'm like, yeah, he's done that before.
He's a chip on the shoulder guy. I like it. Yeah.
Yeah. And he always mentions too. He's like, I have more catches than Devonta Smith. I have more catches than this.
I remember reading a story on SI years ago about his dad and his brother and the whole family. If you ever get a chance to go back into the archives and check it out, it's the father is fascinating and they're brilliant. Like they speak multiple languages. He's a strength
coach, I think, isn't he?
Yeah. But they're incredible students. Like go back and read that's not even the dad changed their name from like Brown to St. Brown and gave him these, these wild first names and everything. I'm telling you, it's unbelievable.
Yeah. I told him, I'm like, when your brother came to the league, That was like my number one goal to pronounce his name. And he goes, Equanimous. What's so hard about that?
Yeah, right.
I said, I never heard of a name like that. So
we can barely pronounce Jeff and Rob. I mean,
yeah,
come on.
yeah, exactly. People can't say my last name right.
Yeah,
half the
exactly.
time. So
yeah,
I still say the only reason they get is because Steve Kerr is still relevant.
I think so. Although that might be coming to an end soon, the way this season's going for the Warriors. We'll
Oh my
see.
God, yeah. And Steph's not playing tonight, so
Not playing, and they're 2-13 on the road. How about that?
I didn't realize how bad they were on the road.
Yeah, it's almost hard to do, man. When you have that kind of talent, it feels like there's always something with Draymond. Like there's just maybe it's finally starting to kind of go down a little bit for them.
I almost wanted to reach out to Micah Parsons this week and tell him thank you for two things. One, for giving us content, and two, this getting rid of this whole. I haven't heard that much of this whole Joel Embiid wants to be traded stuff all week.
I mean, first of all, Joel goes through these like little brat stages, and he's in a brat stage right now. First of all, nobody's calling for him to get traded. No. And if you are looking at, what the possibilities of a change could be, you're looking at it from a team perspective. Like, in other words, this is as far as you could take it. So maybe there's some trades need to be made. It's all your fault, Joel. You need to be traded. Nobody is taking that approach here. I don't know where he's reading this. What is he taking one troll on Twitter and just going by that? It's just grow up, dude.
I've never heard, like, I said to Tyrone Johnson, the Fanatic, the other day, like, is this new? I've never heard about this. Like, I go to games all the time. None of us have ever talked about this. In fact, we're too busy bowing to Joel Embiid's presence.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
I don't get it either, Jeff. I take a lot of phone calls on WIP. I interact with our chat section here on JAKIB. Nobody's calling for him to be traded. That's all I can tell you. And is there a tiny, is there always an outlier? Of course. But I would say 98% of people want Joel Embiid to be a Sixer.
Yeah. It's the same thing with Jalen Hurts, right? Like, you always hear like this vocal minority about Jalen Hurts, but all the people I interact with on Twitter, all the mentions I read, everybody loves Jalen Hurts, and they loved him this all season. I think they were skeptical to see if he could be a franchise quarterback, but they all wanted him to succeed.
Yeah, and the large majority of people said, hey, give him this year, man. Give him a chance. He showed you enough last year where he's earned it. I can't say I'm locked in. I know he's going to be this or that. I think it was a very sort of prudent approach that a lot of people took, which is rare. Look, fans are usually thinking with their heart, and I get it, and that's not a knock. They're kind of reactive, but I actually think most people are like, let's see what it looks like when he's got a better supporting cast, when he's got AJ Brown now. He's got this offensive line. He's got a defense that might put him in good field position. And I think that's the way a lot of people went. Now it's spun into like everybody was hating on, like, it's just, we go into this nonsense now, and it's social media driven in a lot of ways, but it just shows you how clueless, some people are, and some people are who are around the league. Like Micah Parsons should know better. Micah Parsons probably watched more film on Jalen Hurts, more all 22 film, more position breakdown film than the average fan. Yet he comes off like he doesn't know anywhere near as much.
You know what it is? This is what I think frustrates him. The Eagles system confused him and did not block him. They decided, you know what? You're going to have to go cover Jack Stoll today, and you can't do it. Or when things aren't going your way, because at Penn State, I'm telling you, at Penn State, they lined him up anywhere. It was Micah, go do this, go do that. And he did it.
Yeah.
And the Eagles decided, you know what? We're going to make you think for once. Mm-hmm. What's this guy going to do? And I don't think he had an answer for it. And it is funny how he got all his pressures when Lane Johnson left the game. Yeah,
right. That's not a coincidence. I'll tell you the other thing, and just not to beat the dead horse here with what he said. I said to you, I think when we were talking on WIP, the first part of it I could read that he said I could read as doubt more than disrespect, right? Yeah. But when the MVP thing is brought up, and then he does the Brock Purdy comparison, that's where it's disrespectful. And props to Brock Purdy, what he's doing. He's doing a nice, and Kyle Shanahan even more. But give me a break. The guy started 2 football games in his life. That's the part where I thought, like, I'll put it to you this way. Bottom line, if he was asked specifically about Mahomes or Allen, he would have praised those two first, then went into all the weapons that they have in the system and how everything's so good and all that. That was where there was disrespect. And look, do I think Jalen Hurts is losing sleep over what Micah Parsons said? No. But do I think he knows? Yep. Because he's been dealing with this stuff his whole career. He uses it to it's gas in the tank. It's fuel. It's good for him. It's not, oh my God, it's not Carson Wentz who can't handle it. He handles it and he uses it to his advantage.
He just reminds me of the hornet, right? Or the bee in the hive. It's like, come on, get closer. Get closer. Give me a reason to go sting you. And Micah's doing that right now. It's again, this Dallas team, I am telling people right now, they are bracing themselves for the inevitable second round playoff exit.
Yeah, it's very on brand for what the Cowboys have done forever. Run their mouths. And especially the last 25 years, it's a lot more yapping than it is backing it up with your play on the field. And this is right on brand. And this is the kind of crap that Jerry encourages. If you had a real GM in place, there would be a conversation. Like, do you really think, and I don't personally, I don't think Jerry and or Mike McCarthy and or Stephen Jones had even a conversation with Micah Parsons. I think if an Eagles player did this, Howie, Sirianni would have had a conversation with him saying, yo, man, what are you doing? Like, just let's worry about playing and beating this team that beat us earlier in the year. That's 2 games better than us right now in the standings, rather than any of this kind of stuff. Even if it wasn't your intent, which I don't believe it was. Like, I don't think you went on Von Miller's podcast saying, I'm gonna do anything to upset the apple cart, but you did it, and you got to be smarter. I just think it's a whole different approach to things that the Eagles have and the Cowboys have.
Yeah, I've interviewed Jalen Hurts several times one-on-one. I'll tell you what, that guy does not let anything slide. Like, if I mention to him like other players and stuff, he will tell you how great they are. He does not slip. It's not in his nature. Like, and I don't even try to get an answer out of the guy. I just want to hear him say like how great Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen, because people want to hear that stuff.
Absolutely.
They do. They don't want to hear you slight anybody. And I still think it's fun. I got a couple texts after Micah said that from, as I tell you, I go on Kansas City radio stations a lot, and they're like, oh, I see Jalen Hurts is good enough now where he's like Patrick Mahomes, where he gets criticized for pretty much anything he does, even though he proves them wrong every day. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. Like, I still remember Patrick Mahomes can't win without Tyreek Hill. He's having the better year this year than he did in 2018.
Yeah, and look, the notion, first of all, like, this is some kind of slight, the whole system thing. Football's the ultimate system game. You better have a system in place or you're going to get your rear end kicked. You better have players in place or you're going to lose. I mean, come on, man. If you don't have an offensive line, I don't care who you are. Look at what Aaron Rodgers has done since Devontae Adams left. Does that mean Aaron Rodgers stinks or is a system, quote unquote, system quarterback? No, he doesn't have the supporting cast. In that game, you better have a supporting cast.
Don't you think Russell Wilson, if the Eagles ultimately did trade for him, wouldn't you think he'd be Russell Wilson here?
Yes. I think, look, I think there's a lot of things that went on in Denver. We don't have enough time, but one of them is Nathaniel Hackett is way over his head as a head coach. He might be a good offensive coordinator, but that's no doubt in my mind going to be a one and done. And I don't think Russell Wilson just fell off a cliff. I don't. Like, I think he'll be better next year. I'm not telling you he's going to go back to prime peak Russ from the Seattle days, but I just think that thing was just, it's been butchered, across the board and messed up. And yeah, you need a good coach, man. Look, if Patrick Mahomes gets drafted by somebody else, does he turn into Patrick Mahomes? I don't know. But having Andy Reid there, I know that helped him develop the way that he has. Having some patience there, not throwing him into the fire the first year, letting Alex Smith do his thing. It benefited this guy, man. And that's okay. It's all right to say those things. It isn't a slight on Patrick Mahomes.
No, I mean, look at all the great quarterbacks Andy Reid has worked with. Like, there's a reason why I think he's better than Bill Belichick. It's because he's had Donovan, he's had Jeff Garcia, he's had Mike Vick, he's had Kevin Kolb, he's Nick Foles, Patrick Mahomes, Alex Smith, all these guys he's had success with. While Bill, I can point to one guy he's had success with. He's right. But then again, Bill's also a defensive genius, which Andy Reid is not. So again, that's an apples to oranges thing. But I still tell people I would take Andy Reid over Bill Belichick any day of the week, especially over the last couple of years.
Well, I think what you've seen post Brady is personnel mistakes, like this handing this thing over to, like, thinking Matt Patricia was such a football genius that he could handle calling offensive plays and whatever Joe Judge's role is. I don't think you've done Mac Jones any favors.
No,
I really don't. And I'm going to be very curious to see if Belichick has the pride to bring in a real offensive mind. I don't know that he will, Jeff. I'm not sure that he will. And I think it's going to continue to hurt Jones and that offense.
I'll tell you what, I would love to get, since Darius Slay likes to talk, and I know he likes to talk about Matt Patricia, I'd love to ask him, hey, what do you think about Mac Jones yelling at Matt Patricia every week?
Well, I would like to hear what he would say, and he give you an honest answer. I
Yeah.
think the other thing is it makes you also appreciate the Eagles that much more because you don't see this kind of dysfunction, man. You don't see somebody screaming at a a fellow player screaming at another player. You don't see a quarterback screaming at a coordinator. And I get it. A lot of that is they're having success, so you're not going to be yelling at one another. But there's a real team bond here that I think helps them be the team that they have been so far. And you're seeing. You go just watch any other game. Look at Brady on the sideline sometimes, and the tablet smashing and all the other stuff that happens. They're not always on the same page. I feel like with the Eagles, there's a good system in place. I honestly, if you watch that game, Mac Jones is begging them to get the plays in earlier. That's really what it amounted to. And he's running up to the line of scrimmage with like 3 seconds, 4 seconds. I don't blame him for being ticked off.
Yeah, he wants to read the defense. If you don't have time to read the defense, you're going to fail. And he knows that. And look, between the whole play calling, whoever's doing it, it is Matt Patricia, and the whole personnel on there, like, I'm sorry, I'll never, ever slight Nelson Aguilar terribly because of what he did for this franchise in the Super Bowl, but he is not good.
Yeah.
He's
not a primary. Like, he got away, other than the Moss years, he got away, and I'm not taking anything away from Edelman or, Amendola and some of those guys, but Belichick never felt the need to bring in the stud other than Moss. And you need a stud. And you're not giving, Mac Jones doesn't have enough there. Hunter Henry's a nice tight end, but he doesn't have enough in terms of wideouts and playmakers.
They spent a lot of money on Nelson Aguilar, Hunter Henry, and Jonnu Smith.
Yeah.
It's not working.
No, there were mistakes. Look, I don't want to say Belichick's been exposed because he's still a brilliant mind, but you need to have a quarterback, man. It's a quarterback-driven league, period. And he does it. And Mac Jones needs more help, too. So I think it's a combination of things.
What frustrates me, too, is this team, right now, they're a playoff team.
Yeah.
And if they actually had a competent play caller and a competent offense, they could compete with Buffalo. But I think because Belichick might have his pride stuck up as Miami's passing them, Buffalo's passing them, and the Jets may eventually pass them. This could get ugly quick in New England.
Well, it's crazy because we were doing this the other day on Sports Take. We do, like everybody does, we do our rankings. But where I'm going with this is, so we did the AFC. I think it was Wednesday, and I got to tell you, Jeff, like, you fall off a cliff after you get through the first three. Like, you really do. I mean, you get beyond, the usual suspects. Like, you get beyond Kansas City and Buffalo, really, and Cincinnati. You get past those three. Who do you feel like uber confident about? Like, the Ravens are banged up and have coughed up leads all year. The Titans are a disaster right now. Miami, I don't feel a lot of faith in. And you can throw the rest of them, the others, into like a big stew. And like, it's three and then boom for me.
I was telling people that, and I'm glad Miami Dolphins fans understood where I was coming from when I tweeted the Tua stat this week about how he's played in the cold weather.
Yeah.
And like, they get it. They're like, okay, here's a chance to change the narrative. Like, they weren't offended. Like, Buffalo fans ate it up because they know. And it's I'm telling people, it's like going to Buffalo was like when Tampa Bay used to go to Philly. You knew there was an edge there, especially at the vet. That's why it was so big Tampa beat the Eagles in the championship game. It should have happened, but it did. And that's what Tua can do this weekend. And I try telling people this. Like, I think Miami's a good team, but I don't think their defense can pick it up when the offense is slacking.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Their road numbers defensively are horrible, Jeff. There's a huge difference between them road and home. I don't know if it's a warm weather or whatever it is, but there shouldn't be that kind of disparity, and it's bad.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I still don't know if Miami is a Super Bowl contender. I think they can be. I think when they're on, but again, they're going to have to go with the Buffalo. They're going to have to go with the Cincinnati, probably. Kansas City. Who I wouldn't want to play them in the playoffs, but you're right. After the top three, I always thought Baltimore might have a shot, but they haven't done it yet.
No.
They're winning because of their schedule.
I've tried to get behind them all year, and they burned me. They're not as unpredictable, say, like the Chargers, but they're pretty unpredictable, nonetheless. So, yeah, I don't know, and it's good. I think they're getting Huntley back this, for Sunday or this week. That's good, but I don't know with them. I don't. Ultimately, I think they're a playoff win and then probably out. I would guess with Baltimore.
Which I think is cool because then I can add on. Oh, Lamar Jackson's like 2-3 or 2-4 in the playoffs. When people tell me he can't win playoff games,
Right? Yeah. No, I don't buy. I mean, look, we've been hearing this nonsense with Lamar for how long? I think the guy absolutely has the capability of going there. I don't think Harbaugh's done him any favors with receivers either.
No, he hasn't. It's a shame because you figure John would get it.
Yeah.
I don't know. You know what his big upgrade was? I'm going to bring back Deshaun Jackson.
Yeah, and shockingly, he got hurt quickly. Like, what else do we need to see here with Deshaun? He's not. It's done. He'll catch an occasional deep ball, but then his hamstring goes. He's not an impact player anymore.
It's a shame. It really is.
Yeah. Look at a hell of a career, man. He really did.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't know if he'll ever make the Hall of Fame, but I would definitely give him some consideration for it. As a guy who's watched his entire career, I'm like, you know what? That guy was good enough.
Yeah, I think he's just on the outside for me, just on the outside looking in. And you know what? That's still a heck of a career.
It really is. I always say this with Bill Buckner with baseball. I'm like, you know, Bill Buckner is probably close to making the Hall of Fame. Well, how he had that there? I'm like, you know, he had like 2,700 hits.
I'll tell you, the Buckner thing is a real shame. That dude was a hell of a hitter, man. And I blame it more on, I think it was John McNamara, who was the manager, should have had him out of the game. He should not have been in the game playing first base.
Did he have a bad back at the time?
Ankle, foot. He was wearing high top spikes. If you go back and watch it, his wheels are so bad. He should have. If old school Phillies fans were like Greg Luzinski shouldn't have been in the game in 1977.
Oh yeah, my dad says that 45 years later. It's ridiculous.
100%. And Buckner shouldn't have been in the game, but it's a shame. His whole career, and it's a shame he passed away, and you know whatever. I think he came to peace with it at the end of his life, but. The guy had a great career, man, and he could hit. He could hit, but it's all washed away in that era.
I still say with my baseball talk, when people got upset because Rob Thompson put an Alvarado to face Yordan Alvarez, I'm like, you guys know that's the move, right?
Yeah.
It's not. Yordan Alvarez is just really good at baseball.
Yeah. Oh, and he was due. He was so due.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and it all unfortunately came unraveling right there.
Yeah. So I always hated being the prognosticator in sports, but like when I watched every inning of every playoff game this year, Phillies, whoever. When he put in Robbie Ray, when Scott Service put in Robbie Ray against Alvarez, I'm like, oh, this is going to end badly. I'm like, I see Yordan just turning on the ball, and he turned on. And honestly, I think that's the only reason the Astros got Seattle probably played Houston better than anyone else, and that includes the Phillies.
No, you're right. That game was unbelievable, by the way. Unreal. I don't know how many people were paying attention to it, but that game was unbelievable.
Yeah. By the way, just an incredible run by the Phillies. Shout out to them.
It was just so much fun.
Yeah, it really was, and that's what I'm hoping we get with the Eagles this year, right? You get a deep playoff run. It's not a one and done. Like they go to a Super Bowl, you get to experience that again. I mean, this is what I loved about 2004. That was the first time I've ever seen that. You know, my dad was telling me how awesome 1980 was. My grandpa was telling me how awesome 1960 was. It's like and they said, enjoy it. It's going to be a once-in-a-generation thing. I'm lucky to see two of them.
Right. No, well, yeah, right. I mean, to see what the Eagles did in 2004, to see 17, to potentially see this year, there were so many long stretches in Philadelphia sports with awful baseball, awful football, awful basketball. To have them this close in proximity, you know, within like an 18-year stretch or whatever. We're fortunate, man, because it doesn't happen very often around here.
Yeah, I still say to people, I think when people say, oh, the stadium was the loudest during this, or like the NFC Championship, and I said, yeah, you may be right, but I said, I don't think I've ever heard the vet louder than when the Eagles played the Bucs in 2000. Wild card, because it was 5 years since the playoffs. You had the diehards, everybody's diehard with the Eagles. I'm not saying people jump on a bandwagon or anything, but you had those people just starving for football. It was cold. It was New Year's Eve, and you knew the Bucs. Like everybody said, the Bucs were going to go in there and beat them. I said, no, not with Sean King. And Hugh Douglas just blew past George Hegeman and blew up Sean King. That place was insanely loud. I don't think people shut up after that.
No, that was one of those, like the whole place was vibrating. Like it would get like that. You could feel it like shaking. You're almost like, oh my God, are we all right? Are we safe here? Because everything would be contained in the bowl. The difference is with the link, because it's open. Same with Citizens Bank Park. Not that they don't get loud, but because of the opening, I don't think you contain as much of the noise.
I will say this. I've seen Citizens Bank Park shake twice as someone who's been a season ticket holder for the Phillies for almost 2 decades now. When they clinched the NL East in 07.
Yep.
And again, we were anticipating that at that point because they were up big and the Mets. But when Hoskins hit that home run off Spencer Strider, that place shook. We were loud the entire time. And where I was sitting, me and my buddy saw that ball go. Yeah. And then with the bat flip, we're like, oh my God, it's over.
I have to give it to Reese. It was such a cool, it was the opposite of a flip. The spike was just the coolest thing you'll ever see. And it was such a collective, we all felt this. We were all we would have all done the same thing. It was all the same. We all would have reacted the exact same way. It was the perfect reaction to a big moment.
I don't know if you watch MLB Network in the off season, but they're doing their countdown list now. And they did the top 50 bat flips of the year. Right. Harper, Stotts, and Hoskins were in the top 10. Hoskins was number 1, and they literally called it the spike. And they played the Spanish calls. They played every single. They played that 20 different times. I'm like, this does not get old.
I could watch that on a loop the rest of my life and never be bored.
And they show Strider's face, and they show everybody
he's
on
in the dugout with the big mustache, just frowning. It was great. It was great.
Yeah, I still love when Braves fans talk crap about, we're still more relevant than the Phillies over the last 5 years. Yes. I'm like, and I'm just like, I'm still watching Rhys Hoskins' baseball go. Yeah, it's been 2 months. They're like, well, anything could happen in a 5-game series. I'm like, really? Because I can say that about your 88-win team that won the championship last year.
Yeah, I love you waste all year because you can lose in a 5-game or a 3-game series. How about if you're the better team, you take care of business. You don't let the Phillies go on the road in St. Louis and win. You don't let them come back and score. Yeah. What was it, 6 in the 9th? Whatever. I mean, take care of your business, man.
Yeah. So thanks to Micah and the whole system QB thing, there are now 3 phrases that stick in my mind from this year 2022. One is Mickey Mouse tournament for baseball.
Right.
Oh, Mickey Mouse tournament. I'm like, why is it a Mickey Mouse tournament? Because your team lost. Your team
exactly. You never hear any of the winning teams people say that.
No. I'm sure the Houston Astros really thought it was a Mickey Mouse tournament. The only real good team to take care of business, them and the Yankees.
Yeah.
At least in the first round. And then what was the system quarterback?
Yep.
Was another one. Oh, and my favorite now is people move the goalpost.
Yeah, that's another one. Yeah.
I say it all the time. I'm like, keep moving those goalposts because I'm going to kick them right through them.
Well, they've done it a lot with the Eagles this year and Hurts, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah. My favorite stat is the Eagles don't beat anybody. And then when you point out the Eagles beat people and they're like, well, those teams aren't any good. I'm like, no one's good.
Yeah, you point out the 5-1 and average margin of victory 20 points, and they're like, oh, well, and they beat the Vikings and they beat the Cowboys. The 2 teams with 3 losses in the NFC. That doesn't matter. Yeah. I can't even keep having that argument with people. It's absurd. Yeah. And you're right. The whole league is parity and stinks. Like we just talked about, you fall off a cliff after 3 teams in the AFC. So tell me the whole league is great. Who's playing great teams every week? And by the way, the Cowboys have the same schedule as the Eagles. Does that matter? Yeah. They just play them in different order.
I almost did it just to troll Cowboys fans. I'm like, oh, they only beat the Texans by a point.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, a win's a win, in my opinion. I don't care.
And every game takes on its own personality. So the notion that, well, the Eagles barely beat X, but the Cowboys beat X by 20 doesn't mean anything. It means nothing.
Yeah, what are we ranking playoff teams here?
Yeah, I know.
I don't care. Rob, once again, always love having you on. I'm going to have you on Dallas week just so we can talk Dallas Eagles and just get fired up for ourselves.
My pleasure, Jeff. Always fun being with you, man. Thank you.
Sounds great. Thanks for coming on,
Take care.
Rob. Yep. All right. Man, Rob and I went a little bummed